I think you always want to include topics of discussion that are on trend, but also relate them to your overall goals, right? So you don't just want to be speaking into the dark about things that may not be important to everyone else. They're just important to you and your organization.
From Tyler Technologies, it's the Tyler Tech Podcast, where we talk about issues facing communities today and highlight the people, places, and technology making a difference. My name is Jeff Harrell. I'm the Director of Content Marketing for Tyler Technologies, and I'm so glad that you joined me. Well, we did some very detailed generational research in partnership with the Center for Generational Kinetics. We're going to continue to dive into that research because one thing that we learned is that Generation Z prefer to get their information from local government via social media. So today we want to dive into what exactly that means with the perfect person who is our social media expert at Tyler Technologies, Heather Daniels. She is the senior social media specialist with Tyler and knows a great deal about how important social media is in the public sector. You're going to really enjoy this conversation, and there's going to be some statistics in here you're going to find probably really hard to believe. Very interesting conversation. Here is my conversation with Heather Daniels. Well, Heather, I'm super excited to have you back on the Tyler Tech Podcast. And we did some research just a couple years ago that we want to dive into today. And I know that for different generations, they want what we found out with this research that we did with the Center for Generational Kinetics. Different generations want to engage and get information from government in different ways. Gen X, like myself, we go to websites, we send emails. My dad, who's a boomer, he'll walk down to the government office and have a face-to-face conversation. That's a little bit limited, obviously, now with COVID. But for Gen Z, what we found out is they want to get their information from government via social media. So I'd love to dive into that and just understand from your perspective, what does that mean for government agencies who want to connect with this really important generation?
Jeff, thanks. Glad to be back again. This is a great topic, but by my own admission, I am an exennial. All right, the in-between generation. I refer to it as the generation of the original Star Wars trilogy.
There you go.
Right? My childhood was very much analog, but my adulthood very digital, right? So my formative years were AOL, Yahoo, chatting and emailing, right? Because this was my preferred method of digital communication. So when I think about Gen Z, that generation born between 1996 and 2012, right? They are true digital natives with technology always being integrated into their lives, right? Never really knowing life without social media. So it's not surprising that the most generally digital native generation prefers to get their information from government from social media platforms. So social media, in this sense, makes it a lot easier for governments to connect directly to Gen Z. So what does that mean? It means moving forward, post pandemic, government must continue to bring functions online, invest in highly tech literate team members to manage the online transformation that's undergoing right now.
I think often you see social media accounts more about showing what's happening in offices or, especially probably with Facebook. But if Gen Z is really looking to social media for information, I imagine government entities need to think a little bit differently about how they're using social media.
I mean, definitely. Gen Z is always going to be that generation that has that social first lens. They are driven totally by their high usage of real time digital communication. So, connecting with this generation really means prioritizing content that nurtures that two-way interaction and social conversations that are extremely relevant to that generation.
I think a lot of times people like myself, Gen X, we think of Gen Z as disconnected perhaps from government. But the fact that they are using social media to get information from government and the fact that social media is this continuous flow of information, it may be that actually Gen Z is getting or looking for more information from their government. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I think so. I think not only are they looking for more information, they're looking for again, information that pertains to them, the issues that they care about. They're looking for real time information,
Yeah.
right? Happening now. So I think the timeliness of it, the delivery, meaning that it should be on the method of communication that is most preferred by Gen Z. I think all of that really matters in terms of engaging this particular generation.
And I think what's great about social media is you can be really as you said, real time with your information. It's easy to share information. I'm thinking of websites; those are more difficult to update in real time. But social media a little bit easier. So in some ways, this is good news, I think, for government agencies who want to get out real time important information to this important generation. And so here's a question I have, because the research also showed that only 38% of Gen Z is actually satisfied with the kind of information that they're getting from government. So, why do you think that is, and what can government do to maybe change that perception?
There are barriers that I think every generation encounters when they're engaging with local government, right? So everything from long waits, long wait lines, difficulty finding the information that they're looking for, even down to the fees that are involved with obtaining services, right? So just creates an overall frustrating process. So I think for a generation like Gen Z, right, again, that generation that is true digital natives, they find is very off-putting and would prefer interactions with government that's relatively easy, quick, and efficient.
So, you think a lot of that dissatisfaction is more about maybe the old ways of doing business, so to speak. Like you said, the lines going in to do something versus really focusing on ease of use, that citizen experience, sharing that information through social media.
Absolutely.
So based on that, then Heather, what can the public sector do to really help push? You talked a little bit about it, but what are some specific things that they can do to help push that satisfaction number up?
Yeah, so what is going to make online interactions better? I think again, as long as the technology is clear and easy to use, I think though Gen Z is really looking for better connectivity, right, between government offices, some sort of level of improvement with data security, and just creating integrations with services that Gen Zers already use, right? So that single sign on method, sign in with your Google account, sign in with your Facebook account, something that is familiar to this particular generation. So we're really talking about modernizing technology, creating a more connected community. I think this would help the public sector increase overall satisfaction.
So you're really talking about thinking beyond just social media, really into that overall digital experience that Gen Z is now expecting, because they see it in their personal lives. Like you said, single sign on, using Google to sign on to things. They're expecting that same level of ease and connectedness in their interactions with the public sector.
Absolutely. And I always say, well, is it art imitating life or is it life imitating art, right? So the lines
Yeah.
always get blurred. Yeah, and we're just at this point where everything needs to have that very familiar type of place and space at the same time.
And I know Gen Z, when we looked at the research, they were the lowest when it came to being positive about government. I think only 37% said they actually felt positively about their local government. What can governments do? And we can focus on social media as well to help bring that satisfaction number up.
Yeah, so Generation Z has a greater expectation for government to address all of the social economic issues that are important to them, right? So, healthcare, things like civic engagement, racial equity, the environment, all of these things are important to this generation. So, I think overall sentiment is really what we're talking about, would increase if the public sector had more of a voice and was more transparent on social media and how they are working towards addressing these issues.
So it sounds like for the public sector, and this is something we look at from a Tyler Technologies perspective, is what is our social media strategy around sharing information, being transparent. So it sounds like, and I think some government agencies are probably farther ahead than others, but having that clear social media strategy that says, here's the kinds of content we want to share, here's the video, here's the things that mean something to each generation. Being a little bit more strategic about that feels like it's really important.
Absolutely. I think you always want to include topics of discussion that are on trend, but also relate them to your overall goals, right? So you don't just want to be speaking into the dark about things that may not be important to everyone else. They're just important to you and your organization.
That's good. So thinking about your constituents first versus thinking about maybe the information you want to share. That's great. And this statistic also is a little bit interesting as we looked at the research. 66% of Gen Z said that politicians ignore their generation. This is exactly, I think, what you're just talking about. Heather, what can governments do to bring this number in the right direction in terms of feeling like they're being ignored by government?
I don't think it is a case where Gen Zers are not engaged, right? So I think for the most part, Gen Zers have a positive perception toward local government, but I think the perception is though I'm served by local government, I'm just not engaged by my local government. So there needs to be more real time communication on the digital channel of their preference.
That makes sense. And I think we even saw in some of the research too that they felt like government and government systems were built for not their generation. And so I think
Right.
putting a focus on, like you just said, how they want to intake information content and the topics that they're interested in, putting a focus on that is certainly important. This statistic, another one that was a little bit eye opening, only 39% of Gen Zers said they trust government more than they trust social media. How can government leverage? So they've got social media as a tool. How can they leverage that tool to build better trust with this younger generation?
Yeah, so again, this is about the optics. What is really playing out online? So this is really about being a transparent and an authentic brand on social. Any type of open dialogue in real time, right? So AMAs, hashtag AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything sort of campaign. Um, Behind the scenes, the ability to chat openly on social media, just being available and easily approachable is tactics that I think government could use to increase that sort of trust that is missing amongst this generation.
Yeah, I want to dig a little bit deeper into that AMA because I know that's something that's pretty popular. You ask me anything, you let businesses do that or personalities do that to kind of give people a little peek into a little bit more about them. So you're saying that government agencies can use the same approach. They can have an ask me anything and really in real time reply to some of the things that are on the minds and hearts of their younger constituents.
Absolutely. It creates again, that bi-directional sort of open communication. It allows the generation to feel as if they have a say, that they are being considered, that their voice matters.
So if a government agency is listening to this right now, going, how would I pull that off? What's get real practical here? How do you actually execute something like that?
So I think really one of the things that you want to look at is what's being talked about within your social space. You really want to find the topics that you can make a connection to, that Gen Zers are really communicating about. And you want to take that topic and turn it into a more detailed discussion. And perhaps it's you want to spotlight, or perhaps it's you want to highlight what your agency is doing to address that particular issue. Maybe you want to do like a behind the scenes, or you want to do some sort of polling, which is always great. I think, though, the important thing is to be on brand, but be on trend all at the same time. So it's a juggling act that you have to do, where you don't want to lose your brand in the noise, right? You want to create a or carve out a space where you can exist within this larger topic of discussion. You just want to make it relate to your goals, your mission, and your value as a government entity.
So it sounds like you want to put a little bit of parameters around it. In other words, you identify a topic you think would be important to your constituents, and you say, "Hey, ask me anything about this topic," and then dive into a little bit more of a deeper two-way dialogue, or asking questions, doing poll questions. But it sounds like the point is just making sure that there's a two-way, like you said, bi-directional dialogue, but also that you're listening, you're hearing what your constituents have to say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can, if you are struggling for a topic, you can always use your polling questions to poll your audience.
Oh,
What is
that's a
it that
great
they would
idea.
like to hear about? And kind of let them drive the conversation.
I love that. So a poll on what would you like to know more about, and then dive deeper into that answer with an ask me anything. That's great. Very practical. Love that. Well, any final advice to government entities out there wanting to up their social media game and their presence and their usage, knowing how important social media is to this Generation Z?
I would say first and foremost that representation matters. So if you are pushing out social media content that doesn't have imagery that relates to Gen Zers, then I mean, you definitely miss that connection right off the bat. If you're not pushing out your content in a format that appeals to Gen Zers, you're going to miss the connection as well. Not only that, you also have to make sure that your content is super engaging, right? A lot of times you can achieve that by using UGC, or which is user generated content, where you let your brand speak for itself through all of the great mentions that other people in your community are talking about as it relates to your business. Fantastic quotes of the day. Again, quizzes, polls, anything that the person on the other side of the screen has to really interact with.
Mm.
If it's something that's static, and doesn't really engage at all, then they're probably going to keep scrolling, right? So I would also say social customer care. Always keep that in mind. Again, this is a generation that is from that perspective of immediacy. If I get online and I'm going on Twitter and I'm voicing my concern about an issue, I expect to be responded to in a very timely manner. So just responding immediately and not like within the next business day, I think is important. It's a concept that I think a lot of government struggle with.
That's a great point, Heather. I was actually chatting, or I tried to chat with a business yesterday that I had a little issue with, and it was a bot. And so I was chatting with this bot, and then it said, "All of our agents are busy. Please leave your email, and we'll get back to you in 5 to 7 business days."
Hmm. Hmm.
That didn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy. that was not that was not the kind of immediacy to the issue that I had that you're talking about here. So I think this is a great piece of advice, which is the communication should not be one way. It should be two-way, bi-directional communication, but it also should be timely, because I think then you're feeling like you're meeting the needs, and your constituents are feeling both heard and that they're important to their government. Heather, this has been great information, and listeners out there may have follow-up questions for you. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, Jeff, I'm everywhere and nowhere all at the same time on social media.
Of course.
So the best way to reach me would be on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And the best way to find you is just Heather Daniels.
I think there are a lot of me on LinkedIn, so I think my middle initial, which is L, so it's Heather L. Daniels.
With Tyler Technologies. When you see the Tyler Technologies, you'll know you have the right one.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Heather, thanks for this great information and insight into social media and Gen Z, and we really appreciate your expertise. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you want to get your hands on the Gen research that we did, you can get that research by going to our resource center. Go to tylertech.com click on resources at the top of the page, and then in the search bar, just put Gen Research. That will take you to the actual Gen Research document. You can download that. It's got all the information we talked about today and more. Hope that you enjoy that resource. Well, thanks so much for joining me. We have a brand new podcast episode that drops every other Monday. So make sure you subscribe. We've got lots of great podcast episodes planned throughout 2022. So again, thanks so much for listening. This is Jeff Harrell, Director of Content Marketing for Tyler Technologies. We'll talk to you soon.